La lamarin la vergüenza apache, pero él la convirtió en su mayor orgullo. His father worked long hours at a factory, and his mother cleaned houses to make ends meet. Every day was a struggle to put food on the table and keep the little family afloat. From an early age, Miguel learned that life would not give him anything for free. He had to fight for every small achievement, every scrap of recognition, and every ounce of respect. Despite his determination, the neighborhood kids and even some adults had a nickname for him, La Vergüenza Apache. At first, Miguel did not understand why people laughed at him or whispered the name behind his back. The words hurt deeply, but they were a constant reminder of how others saw him. It was not just the nickname, it was the judgment, the smirks, and the sense that he could never live up to expectations. At school, things were even worse. His classmates would tease him, call him names, and sometimes push him around. Teachers, too, seemed to have little hope for him. They often assumed he was careless, lazy, or incapable of learning. Even in the smallest assignments, Miguel felt the weight of doubt pressing down on him, making him question his own abilities. At home, life was no easier. His father, a stern and serious man, often compared Miguel to his older siblings, who seemed to excel effortlessly. Miguel's brother had good grades, played sports well, and was admired in the neighborhood. His sister was polite, clever, and always made their parents proud. Miguel, on the other hand, struggled to keep up. He often failed to meet expectations, even though he tried his best. Each mistake felt magnified. Each failure made him feel smaller. Sometimes, he would lie awake at night, staring at the cracked ceiling of his bedroom, wondering if he would ever be good enough to make his family proud or escape the ridicule that followed him everywhere. Despite the harsh words and constant struggles, Miguel had a spark inside him, a quiet determination that he could not quite name yet. He loved observing the world around him. The way the neighborhood changed colors with the seasons, the way children played games with laughter so pure it seemed unbreakable, and the way the sun painted golden patterns over the rooftops in the evening. He loved learning, even if school made him feel small. He would sit for hours trying to read books he borrowed from the small library in the neighborhood. Sometimes he struggled to understand the words, but he refused to give up. There was a part of him that believed he could learn, grow, and one day change the story people told about him. Miguel's days were often long and lonely. After school, while other children played freely or went to visit friends, Miguel had chores to do. He carried water, cleaned the house, and helped his mother with errands. He knew that his family depended on him. These responsibilities, heavy for someone his age, taught him discipline, patience, and resilience. But they also isolated him from other children, who did not understand why he could not join their games. Sometimes, the loneliness became overwhelming. He would sit on the curb outside his house, watching other kids laugh and play, wishing he could be part of that world. The nickname La Vergüenza Apache felt like a wall between him and everyone else, a constant reminder that he did not belong. Even though Miguel carried this burden, he had moments of quiet hope. There were times when he discovered a new skill, even a small one, that made him feel proud. He loved drawing, and he would spend hours with pencil and paper, creating sketches of the neighborhood, of people, of imaginary worlds where he was not mocked. Drawing became his escape, a secret place where no one could call him names or judge him. He also loved listening to stories from older neighbors who had faced hardships of their own. He admired their courage and resilience. Every story planted a seed of belief in him, a tiny spark that whispered, "You can be more than what they say about you." School continued to be a challenge. Teachers often overlooked Miguel, expecting him to fail. He sometimes struggled with reading aloud or solving math problems, and the other students would laugh. It was humiliating, but each time he failed, he also learned something new about himself. He realized that mistakes were not the end. that learning often came through struggle, and that persistence could be stronger than talent. Slowly, he began to pay attention to what worked and what didn't. If a teacher explained something in one way and he did not understand, he would try to find another way to understand it. He began helping other students in small ways too, and although few noticed, these small acts gave him a sense of purpose and pride. At home, Miguel found comfort in small victories. When he managed to solve a difficult math problem, or when he helped his mother with an important task, he felt a quiet pride that no one could take away. He began to realize that the opinion of the world, while harsh, was not the only truth. There was another truth, his own truth, built on effort, persistence, and courage. He started believing that one day he could prove to everyone, and most importantly to himself, that the nickname La Vergüenza Apache was not his destiny. Miguel's childhood was a mix of hardship and small triumphs, of pain and quiet hope. Every insult, every failure, every moment of isolation shaped him, but it also strengthened him. He learned that life was rarely fair, but that he had the power to shape his own path. Deep inside, he carried a dream that one day he could turn shame into pride, that the world would remember him not for the name they gave him, but for the courage and determination he showed in overcoming every obstacle. Even in the darkest moments, when the nickname stung the most, and when the world seemed determined to push him down, Miguel held onto a quiet conviction. He could not see the full picture yet, but he sensed that every struggle, every tear, and every lonely night was preparing him for something greater. Somewhere in the future, he knew, he would rise above the label, and the very thing that brought him shame might one day become the source of his greatest pride. And so, Miguel continued to walk through the narrow streets of his neighborhood, carrying his dreams quietly in his heart. Each day brought new challenges, but also new lessons. He knew the world could be cruel, but he also knew that inside him was a fire that no name, no insult, and no obstacle could extinguish. The nickname La Vergüenza Apache would follow him, but Miguel was beginning to understand something important. It could not define him unless he allowed it to. The journey had only just begun, but the seeds of resilience, courage, and hope were planted. Miguel was ready to take the first steps, even if no one else believed in him yet. And in those early days, the first sparks of determination began to shine, preparing him for a path that would one day turn shame into pride, and sorrow into triumph. Miguel's life began to change the day he met Señor Alvarez, a local mentor who ran a small community program for children in the neighborhood. Señor Alvarez had a reputation for seeing potential in kids who others overlooked. He noticed Miguel one afternoon as he struggled to keep up with a group of children playing soccer in a dusty park. Miguel had always loved sports, especially soccer, but his lack of confidence and skill made him an easy target for teasing. As he tried to kick the ball, he missed, stumbled, and fell. The other kids laughed, but Señor Alvarez walked over quietly and helped him up. "Don't worry," he said kindly. "Everyone starts somewhere. You just need the right guidance and a little patience." Miguel looked up, surprised. No one had ever spoken to him that way. Most adults had scolded him or ignored him, and his peers only mocked him. For the first time, someone seemed to see him, not as La Vergüenza Apache, but as a boy with potential. That small act of kindness planted a seed of hope in Miguel's heart. The following week, Señor Alvarez invited Miguel to join the community program. It was a place where children could learn new skills, play games, and gain confidence under the guidance of mentors. Miguel hesitated at first. He feared failure, ridicule, and the thought of being laughed at by other kids. But deep inside, he felt a curiosity he could not ignore. Slowly, he agreed to go, promising himself that he would at least try. The first day at the program was both exciting and intimidating. There were children of all ages, some skilled and confident, others shy and awkward like him. Miguel felt nervous and unsure of himself. When it came time to play soccer, he froze. His legs felt heavy and his heart raced. He kicked the ball clumsily, and it rolled far away from where he wanted it to go. Some children laughed, and he felt the familiar sting of embarrassment. But Señor Alvarez came over again, quietly guiding him, showing him how to position his feet, how to watch the ball, and how to stay focused. "Don't worry about the mistakes," Señor Alvarez said. "Every champion was once a beginner. The important thing is to keep trying." For the first time, Miguel realized that failure was not the end of the world. It was just a step in learning. That simple idea gave him courage. He returned the next day, and the day after that, determined to improve. Slowly, with patience and guidance, he started learning. He became more coordinated, more aware of the game, and more confident in his abilities. It was not easy. He fell many times, got scraped knees, and felt frustrated. But each time he got up, he felt a small victory, a quiet whisper inside telling him that he was capable of more than he had imagined. Outside the program, life remained difficult. His father still expected him to contribute at home, and school continued to be challenging. Some teachers doubted him, and some classmates still called him names. But Miguel began to see a difference in himself. He had found a place where he could grow without fear. He began to believe that the nickname, while still hurtful, did not define his entire life. He started to understand that with dedication, he could slowly change the story that others had written for him. Señor Alvarez was more than just a mentor. He was a teacher of life. He encouraged Miguel not only in sports but also in character. He taught him about responsibility, respect, and the value of hard work. "Talent is nothing without effort," he often said. "Anyone can be laughed at, but it takes courage to keep going, to rise above the insults, and to be better than yesterday." These lessons stayed with Miguel. He began practicing at home, even when no one was watching. He would kick a ball against the wall for hours, improving his control. He studied books, not just for school but for personal growth. He read about athletes, leaders, and ordinary people who had achieved greatness despite facing obstacles. Each story inspired him, fueling his determination to rise above his label. At first, Miguel's progress was slow, and he often compared himself to others. Some children picked up skills faster than he did. Some seemed naturally talented and confident. Miguel felt discouraged, and sometimes he wanted to give up. But Señor Alvarez reminded him that every person has their own journey. "Don't measure yourself against others," he said. "Measure yourself against who you were yesterday." Miguel learned to celebrate small victories, a better pass, a successful goal, or even the courage to speak up in class. Slowly, confidence replaced fear. Outside of sports, Miguel began noticing changes in other areas of his life. At school, he started participating more. He asked questions, tried harder on assignments, and even helped classmates who struggled. Teachers began to notice a shift in his attitude, though not everyone believed in him yet. Classmates started seeing him differently too. Some who had teased him before began to show respect, not because he was suddenly perfect, but because he kept trying when others would have given up. This recognition was small, but it mattered deeply to Miguel. Each nod of approval, each word of encouragement, reminded him that change was possible. Miguel also began helping his family in new ways. He applied lessons of discipline and perseverance to household responsibilities. He managed chores more efficiently, helped his mother plan small budgets, and even tutored his younger siblings when they struggled in school. His parents noticed the change too. While his father remained stern, he could no longer ignore Miguel's effort and dedication. His mother, proud and hopeful, quietly celebrated each small success. Miguel realized that change started from within, but it could also influence the people around him. During this time, Miguel faced one of his first real tests. A local sports competition was announced, and all children in the neighborhood were invited to participate. Miguel wanted to join but was terrified. What if he failed in front of everyone? What if they laughed again and the nickname returned with even more force? Señor Alvarez encouraged him, reminding him that effort mattered more than the outcome. You will not be judged by the mistakes you make, but by the courage to take the first step, he said. Miguel trained tirelessly. He practiced drills, ran long distances, and focused on his skills. He faced moments of doubt, nights when he felt exhausted and unsure if he could succeed, but he kept going. Each day of preparation built more than skill, it built character. When the competition day arrived, Miguel was nervous but ready. He played with determination, making mistakes but also achieving moments of brilliance. By the end of the event, he did not win first place, but he gained something far more valuable: self-respect. For the first time, he realized that his efforts were stronger than the words of those who had mocked him. The nickname, La Vergüenza Apache, no longer had power over him. From that point on, Miguel's life started shifting gradually. The combination of mentorship, practice, and inner determination gave him a new perspective. He realized that while the world might judge him, he had the power to define himself. The nickname, once a source of shame, became a challenge, a reminder that he could rise above expectations and create a story of his own making. Miguel's journey in this period taught him important lessons. He learned that guidance matters, that mentors can change lives, and that effort and perseverance outweigh natural talent. He understood that mistakes are not failures but opportunities to grow. Most importantly, he began to see that courage is not the absence of fear, but the ability to act despite it. By the end of this chapter of his life, Miguel was no longer just the boy everyone whispered about. He was a young individual discovering his potential, slowly transforming shame into confidence. The spark that had been inside him since childhood was now glowing brighter, and Miguel understood that this was only the beginning. He could not yet see the full path ahead, but he knew that with continued effort, guidance, and belief in himself, he could one day turn even the harshest judgment into pride. Miguel walked home each evening with a sense of purpose. He still faced challenges, still struggled at school, and still had moments of doubt, but he had discovered a new truth. Life could be changed through determination, practice, and the courage to rise above labels. The nickname La Vergüenza Apache remained, but it no longer defined him. It had become a reminder of the distance he had traveled and the promise of a future where he could transform shame into strength. Miguel's life after joining Señor Alvarez's program was no longer just about surviving each day. He had entered a world where effort, perseverance, and determination mattered more than talent or luck. But even with guidance and initial success, Miguel quickly learned that the path to transforming himself would not be easy. Life continued to challenge him in ways he had never expected. At school, the nickname La Vergüenza Apache still followed him. Some classmates had begun to respect him, but others remembered the boy they had teased for so long. Every day, he faced whispers, sideways glances, and occasional mockery. There were moments when Miguel felt frustrated, wondering why some people refused to see the change he was working so hard to create. It was a constant reminder that growth required more than just talent or courage. It required resilience. He learned that people would not always acknowledge progress, but that should not stop him from moving forward. Miguel also faced challenges at home. His father, though beginning to notice Miguel's efforts, still compared him to his older siblings. There were days when harsh words and criticism cut deep. Miguel wanted to respond angrily, but he remembered the lessons from Señor Alvarez: patience, respect, and focus on his own journey. Instead of arguing, he turned his energy toward improvement, proving, through action rather than words, that he was capable of more than anyone expected. His mother, quietly supportive, encouraged him to keep pursuing his goals, reminding him that every small step counted. One of Miguel's biggest challenges came when he decided to participate in a regional sports tournament. He had trained tirelessly under Señor Alvarez's guidance, but the competition was fierce. Children from wealthier families had better equipment, more experience, and sometimes unfair advantages. Miguel felt a mixture of fear and excitement. He remembered the words of his mentor, "It is not where you start, but how much heart you put into the journey." The first day of the tournament was overwhelming. The stadium was crowded, filled with cheering parents, confident players, and bright banners. Miguel's heart raced as he looked around. He knew that failure here would feel public and humiliating. Yet instead of shrinking away, he reminded himself of the countless hours of practice, the scraped knees, the long runs, and the quiet determination that had brought him here. He focused on what he could control, his effort, his focus, and his attitude. The matches were grueling. Miguel stumbled, missed goals, and sometimes felt like giving up. The other teams were fast, coordinated, and strong. Many times he fell behind, and a sense of fear and doubt crept in. But each time he felt himself faltering, he thought of Señor Alvarez's words, of the struggles he had overcome, and the little victories that had built his confidence. He took a deep breath, adjusted his position, and tried again. Slowly, his skill improved. He learned to anticipate the ball, communicate with his teammates, and make smarter decisions under pressure. By the end of the tournament, Miguel had not only played better than he ever had before, but he had also gained something far more important: confidence in himself. He realized that winning was not always about being the fastest or the strongest. It was about persistence, courage, and the willingness to face challenges head-on. Even when he did not secure first place, he felt a sense of pride that no trophy could match. The nickname La Vergüenza Apache, which had once been a source of deep shame, now felt like a reminder of how far he had come. Miguel also faced obstacles outside sports. At school, academic work remained difficult. Some subjects required extra effort, and there were times when he doubted his abilities. But Miguel had learned a crucial lesson: persistence could overcome initial failure. He developed a routine, dedicating time to study each day, asking for help when needed, and practicing patience with himself. Slowly, his grades improved, and teachers began to notice his dedication. While progress was gradual, Miguel understood that long-term growth mattered more than instant recognition. Another challenge Miguel encountered was social. Some peers who had once mocked him still questioned his transformation. Invitations to join groups, play games, or participate in events were not always extended. He sometimes felt lonely, as if he were still on the outside looking in. But Miguel had learned to rely on inner strength and focus on the people who supported him. He discovered the value of meaningful friendships over popularity. Those who truly cared about his journey celebrated his victories and encouraged him during setbacks. These relationships reinforced the idea that success is not only about achievement, but also about surrounding yourself with positive influence. During this time, Miguel also faced physical challenges. Hours of training took a toll on his body. His legs ached, his muscles were sore, and there were moments when fatigue threatened to overwhelm him. But he embraced the discomfort, understanding that growth often comes with struggle. He learned to push past pain, to rest when needed, and to focus on consistency rather than intensity alone. The discipline he cultivated in sports spilled into other areas of life. He became more organized at school, more responsible at home, and more aware of his own strengths and weaknesses. Miguel's resilience was tested in unexpected ways when a severe injury during practice temporarily sidelined him. A fall during a scrimmage left him with a sprained ankle, forcing him to watch from the sidelines as other children continued to play. At first, he felt frustrated, even angry. He wondered if his progress had been wasted. But once again, he recalled Señor Alvarez's advice. Setbacks are not the end, they are part of the journey. Miguel used the time to study tactics, observe other players, and plan strategies. He also focused on mental strength, realizing that resilience is as much about the mind as it is about physical ability. By the time he returned to the field, he was stronger, smarter, and more determined than ever. Throughout these challenges, Miguel's family began to see a transformation. His father, who had once been critical and demanding, started to recognize Miguel's perseverance and dedication. Though he did not always express it openly, Miguel could sense a growing pride. His mother continued to be a quiet source of encouragement, reminding him that effort and character mattered more than external recognition. Even his younger siblings began looking up to him, inspired by his discipline, focus, and courage in the face of adversity. Miguel's journey during this period also taught him the value of patience. He realized that meaningful change rarely happens overnight. Each skill learned, each small victory achieved, and each obstacle overcome contributed to a larger transformation. He began to celebrate progress rather than perfection, understanding that the path to success is often winding and filled with unexpected twists. Even moments of failure became opportunities to learn, adapt, and grow stronger. By the end of this chapter of his life, Miguel had grown in ways that went beyond skill or recognition. He had developed resilience, patience, and self-belief. He had learned that obstacles, whether physical, emotional, or social, were not barriers but challenges to overcome. The nickname La Vergüenza Apache no longer held the power to define him. Instead, it had become a symbol of the distance he had traveled and the strength he had built through hard work, courage, and determination. Miguel continued to train, study, and grow, driven by a quiet inner fire. Each day brought new challenges, but also new opportunities to prove to himself that he was more than the label others had given him. He realized that life would continue to test him, but he now had the tools to face setbacks, rise above criticism, and keep moving forward. The lessons of discipline, perseverance, and self-belief were becoming deeply ingrained, shaping not only his abilities but also his character. Through hard work, patience, and courage, Miguel was slowly turning shame into pride. The boy who had once been called La Vergüenza Apache was no longer just a target of ridicule. He was becoming a young individual who understood the value of persistence, the power of resilience, and the importance of self-worth. Every scraped knee, every lost match, every late night of study contributed to a story of growth, strength, and determination, a story that was uniquely his own. By the end of this period, Miguel realized something important. The journey was far from over, but he was ready. He had faced obstacles, endured challenges, and learned lessons that would carry him forward. The nickname that had once haunted him was no longer a burden. It was a reminder of his courage, effort, and the promise of what he could achieve. Miguel knew that if he continued on this path, he could transform not only himself, but also inspire others, showing that even the harshest beginnings can lead to extraordinary outcomes. After years of persistent effort, Miguel began to notice something remarkable. People were starting to see him differently. The boy who had once been mocked and whispered about as La Vergüenza Apache was slowly gaining recognition, not only for his skills but for his character. It was not an overnight change. It came gradually, through countless hours of practice, dedication, and the quiet courage to keep going despite doubt and criticism. But finally, Miguel began to experience the reward of his perseverance, and the sense of pride it brought was unlike anything he had felt before. It started with small victories. In school, teachers began acknowledging his effort. A teacher praised him for completing a difficult assignment, another for helping a classmate understand a tough problem. These moments, though minor in the eyes of others, meant the world to Miguel. They were proof that his determination was making a difference. At the community program, his mentors recognized his growth. Senor Alvarez often smiled, telling him, "You are not the same boy who walked in here years ago. Look at what your courage has built." Miguel felt a deep sense of accomplishment, realizing that his efforts were starting to change not only how others saw him, but also how he saw himself. Sports, too, became a stage where Miguel's transformation became visible. He had been training for years, refining his skills and learning not just to play but to lead. During local tournaments, he began to stand out. His focus, discipline, and teamwork impressed coaches, teammates, and even competitors. People began to respect his presence on the field. What was once a source of embarrassment, the nickname that had haunted him, was no longer whispered in derision. Some began to use it jokingly, but now it felt different. Miguel no longer felt shame. He had taken control of the narrative. The nickname had shifted from a mark of humiliation to a reminder of the journey he had endured. With recognition came new opportunities. Miguel was invited to participate in higher-level competitions, representing his community. He also began receiving praise from community members who had watched his transformation. Neighbors who had once ignored or dismissed him now spoke of his determination, courage, and leadership. The same people who had whispered about his failures now celebrated his achievements. This shift in perception was powerful, not because it defined him, but because it reflected the truth he had worked so hard to create. That effort, discipline, and perseverance could overcome the harshest judgments. Miguel's confidence grew, and with it, his sense of responsibility. He realized that his story could inspire others. Children in the neighborhood who had once laughed at him or ignored him began to look up to him. Some came to him seeking advice, wanting to learn how to overcome challenges and face obstacles without giving up. Miguel embraced this role, remembering how much guidance from Senor Alvarez had changed his own life. He shared his experiences with patience and care, teaching younger children that failure was not the end, and that perseverance could transform their lives. He became not just a participant in the community, but a source of inspiration. Despite the recognition, Miguel remained humble. He knew that success was not just about talent or recognition, but about consistency, effort, and the ability to keep learning. He continued to practice, study, and grow. He worked on improving not just his skills on the field, but also his understanding of people, communication, and leadership. He realized that true achievement was not measured by trophies or praise, but by the positive impact one could have on others. This mindset helped him stay grounded even as admiration and respect grew around him. Miguel also began to reflect on the journey that had brought him here. He remembered the lonely afternoons, the teasing classmates, the weight of the nickname, and the moments of self-doubt. Those experiences had been painful, but they had also been essential. They had forced him to develop resilience, patience, and determination. Each challenge, each obstacle, had prepared him for the opportunities he now faced. He realized that the struggles that once seemed unbearable had shaped him into someone stronger, more focused, and more compassionate. As recognition grew, Miguel began setting higher goals. He wanted to continue improving, not just for himself, but for the community that had supported him. He dreamed of leading his team to victories in regional and national competitions, showing others that hard work and dedication could overcome any label. He also wanted to mentor children in the same way he had been mentored, creating opportunities for them to develop skills, confidence, and self-belief. Miguel understood that pride was not only personal, it was shared, and the best way to honor his own journey was to help others along the path. Family became a central part of his pride. His parents, who had watched him struggle and persevere, were now openly proud of his accomplishments. His father, once critical and demanding, began acknowledging his growth with quiet words of encouragement. His mother celebrated every small victory, sharing Miguel's successes with neighbors and family friends. Even his younger siblings began to see him as a role model, someone who had turned hardship into opportunity and shame into pride. Miguel felt a profound sense of fulfillment, knowing that his efforts had not only transformed his own life, but also influenced the lives of those he loved most. One day, as Miguel walked through his neighborhood, he noticed the younger children playing in the same dusty streets where he had once felt so out of place. He saw their laughter, their curiosity, and their struggles. He remembered how lost and discouraged he had once felt, how the nickname had made him feel small and invisible. In that moment, Miguel realized that his journey had a purpose beyond personal achievement. He wanted to be the person who could guide others, who could show that determination, discipline, and courage could transform lives. The nickname that had once brought shame now served as a symbol of what was possible with effort and heart. Miguel's achievements did not go unnoticed by the wider community. Local schools, sports organizations, and community leaders began recognizing his contributions. They celebrated his victories and highlighted his story as an example of resilience and perseverance. Miguel was invited to speak at events, sharing his experiences and encouraging others to believe in themselves. Each time he spoke, he felt a sense of responsibility, knowing that his words could inspire others to face their own challenges with courage. Through these experiences, Miguel developed a deep sense of self-worth. He no longer measured himself by the judgments of others, but by the effort he put forth and the progress he achieved. The nickname, La Vergüenza Apache, had lost its power over him entirely. Instead, it had become a reminder of the journey, of the courage it took to rise above judgment, and of the pride that came from perseverance. Miguel understood that true pride was earned through effort, integrity, and the willingness to keep moving forward even when the path was difficult. By the end of this period, Miguel had fully transformed from the boy who had once been mocked and underestimated into a young individual of strength, confidence, and purpose. Recognition, respect, and admiration were not the ultimate goal. They were a byproduct of the effort, discipline, and courage that had defined his journey. Miguel had learned that labels do not define a person. Actions, character, and persistence do. As Miguel looked back on the years of struggle, he felt a sense of gratitude. The nickname that had once haunted him had been a catalyst, pushing him to prove not to others, but to himself, that he was capable of greatness. The hardships, failures, and doubts were no longer burdens. They were the foundation upon which he had built his pride. Miguel had turned shame into strength, isolation into leadership, and doubt into determination. With each step forward, Miguel continued to inspire others. Children in his neighborhood sought his guidance, peers respected his abilities, and the community celebrated his achievements. Miguel understood that his journey was far from over, but he now had the tools, the mindset, and the heart to continue growing, achieving, and helping others along the way. The boy who had once been called La Vergüenza Apache had not only survived, but had transformed his life into a story of courage, perseverance, and pride that could inspire generations to come. Miguel's journey had reached a stage where his personal victories were no longer only about himself. The boy who had once been mocked and called La Vergüenza Apache had grown into a young man of courage, determination, and purpose. Yet he understood that true transformation was not just about achieving success for himself. It was about creating opportunities, inspiring others, and leaving a lasting impact. By now, Miguel had become a symbol in his community. People who had once whispered about him now shared his story as an example of perseverance. Neighbors, teachers, and even local leaders spoke of the boy who refused to be defined by a nickname, who turned hardship into triumph, and who proved that determination could change the course of a life. But Miguel never let the praise distract him. He knew that recognition was not the ultimate goal. The goal was to continue growing and to help others realize their potential. One of Miguel's most significant contributions began when he decided to start a mentoring program for children in his neighborhood. He remembered how much Senor Alvarez's guidance had meant to him, and he wanted to offer the same kind of support to others. With limited resources, he set up small gatherings in community spaces, teaching children basic sports skills, discipline, and the value of perseverance. He encouraged them to believe in themselves, even when the world seemed to doubt them. Slowly, more children joined the program, drawn by Miguel's example and the safe, encouraging environment he created. Miguel's approach went beyond teaching sports or schoolwork. He focused on character building, sharing his own story of struggles and triumphs. He spoke honestly about the pain of being mocked, the challenge of overcoming a nickname that once caused him shame, and the importance of persistence. His words resonated deeply with the children, many of whom were facing difficulties similar to those Miguel had experienced. They began to understand that their current struggles did not define them, and that effort, courage, and self-belief could transform their lives. As the program grew, Miguel realized that leadership required more than just inspiration. It required dedication, planning, and consistency. He worked tirelessly to organize sessions, secure equipment, and reach out to more children who could benefit from his guidance. There were challenges, of course. Limited resources, occasional setbacks, and the pressures of balancing his own responsibilities tested him. But Miguel had learned long ago that obstacles were not reasons to quit. They were opportunities to learn, adapt, and become stronger. Each difficulty he faced became a lesson in patience, resilience, and creativity. The impact of Miguel's work began to extend beyond the neighborhood. Schools, local sports organizations, and community leaders started noticing the program's effect on children. They saw increased confidence, improved skills, and growing self-esteem among participants. Some children who had once been shy or discouraged were now stepping forward with new courage, inspired by Miguel's story. It became clear that Miguel's journey was no longer just about personal transformation. It was about creating a ripple effect, changing the lives of countless children who might otherwise have felt overlooked or powerless. Miguel also focused on his own continued growth. He understood that to inspire others, he needed to lead by example. He kept practicing, studying, and pushing himself in sports, academics, and personal development. He sought new challenges, knowing that growth required stepping out of comfort zones. In every action, Miguel demonstrated discipline, resilience, and humility, reinforcing the lessons he taught to others. His life had become a testament to the power of persistence, courage, and self-belief. Through his mentoring, Miguel encountered children facing different struggles: poverty, bullying, or lack of confidence. He approached each child with patience, empathy, and understanding, recognizing that everyone's journey is unique. He encouraged them to focus on small steps, celebrate victories, and learn from setbacks. Miguel remembered the loneliness and ridicule he had once faced and knew that even small acts of guidance and support could make a world of difference. His experiences had taught him that compassion and leadership were inseparable from personal success. Miguel's family continued to be a source of pride and support. His father, once distant and critical, now expressed admiration for his son's dedication, leadership, and positive influence on the community. His mother, who had always believed in him quietly, now openly celebrated his achievements and shared stories of his mentoring work. His siblings looked up to him, inspired by his transformation and the impact he had on others. Miguel realized that his journey had not only reshaped his own life, but also strengthened the bonds and values within his family. As time passed, Miguel began to receive recognition beyond his neighborhood. Local media featured his story, highlighting how a boy once burdened by shame had turned his struggles into a source of inspiration. Invitations to speak at schools and community events grew. Miguel accepted each opportunity, always emphasizing the same lessons that had guided him: resilience, perseverance, courage, and the power to rise above labels. He wanted every child who heard his story to know that no nickname, no failure, and no moment of doubt could define their future. Miguel also focused on creating long-term impact. He sought partnerships with schools, local organizations, and volunteers to expand his mentoring program. He worked on establishing resources, creating structured sessions, and ensuring that children from all backgrounds could access support and guidance. His vision was not just about temporary encouragement. It was about building a foundation that could continue to help children grow for years to come. Miguel's determination, combined with his personal story of triumph, gave credibility and inspiration to every initiative he led. Even with all the recognition and success, Miguel remained humble. He knew that pride was not about boasting or seeking admiration. It was about acknowledging the journey, valuing effort, and using one's achievements to help others. Every child who smiled, every parent who thanked him, and every small success in the program reminded him that true pride comes from making a positive difference in the world. He had learned that his own journey, once defined by shame and ridicule, could now inspire courage and hope in countless others. Miguel's legacy became firmly established through his mentoring, his achievements, and the stories he shared. The nickname La Vergüenza Apache, which had once been a source of humiliation, had been transformed into a symbol of resilience, courage, and triumph. Children who had heard his story began to see themselves differently, believing that their circumstances did not define their potential. Families began to recognize the power of mentorship and guidance, and the community saw the value of supporting young people through encouragement rather than judgment. By the time Miguel reached adulthood, he had solidified his place as a role model, mentor, and leader. His life was no longer defined by shame or the judgments of others, but by the effort, perseverance, and courage he had invested in himself and in others. The journey that began with ridicule and self-doubt had transformed into a story of empowerment, pride, and lasting impact. Miguel had proven that even the harshest beginnings could lead to extraordinary outcomes when met with resilience and heart. Miguel often reflected on his journey, remembering the long afternoons of loneliness, the teasing, the doubt, and the hard work that had shaped him. Every obstacle had been a lesson, every setback a chance to grow. He realized that his story was not only about overcoming personal shame, but about the ability to inspire others to rise above their challenges. The transformation was complete. The boy once called La Vergüenza Apache had become a young man whose courage, dedication, and leadership left a legacy that would endure for generations. Through mentoring, public speaking, and personal example, Miguel continued to influence children, families, and communities. He had created a life that was meaningful, impactful, and inspiring. The nickname that had once caused him pain now served as a reminder of how far he had come, and what could be achieved through resilience, perseverance, and belief in oneself. Miguel had turned what was once a symbol of shame into a beacon of hope, a story that would continue to inspire, guide, and encourage anyone facing challenges, doubts, or ridicule. In the end, Miguel understood that true pride is not given by others. It is earned through effort, courage, and the willingness to rise above adversity. His life had become proof that even the deepest shame could be transformed into a source of strength, that obstacles could become opportunities, and that a single individual, determined to persevere, could create a legacy that touched countless lives. Miguel had turned a painful nickname into a lifelong symbol of pride, leaving a mark on the world that could never be erased.